Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another one of our Better Investing online tools tutorials. My name is Ann Cunias. I will be acting as host today, and it is my job here to introduce our main speaker, Susie Artsberger. Susie is the Director of Information Technology here at Better Investing. She's also the product manager of these wonderful online stock tools that we will be taking a look at. And she's an investor. She's one of the smartest people I know. So, Susie, let's get started.
Well, thank you, Anne. That's a very kind introduction from another very smart person. So thank you all to our attendees for joining us tonight. And I'll start out right away and thank our backroom staff who makes this possible with Charles Bard and Joan Loken and Ann Cunias. Let's begin. Today's session, we're going to look at the newer features and a couple of underused features that we want to make sure everyone knows about because we're not seeing it used in a lot of our interactions with members. So we'll be looking at our CoreSSG tool, which performs the stock selection guide, SSGPlus, which does the same thing, but in a little bit different format. We'll look at stock screening, where we've made some improvements, and we'll run you through our additional help resources. Our session today will be recorded, and we may be looking at some stocks, and if we do, please do your own research, because you just don't know what I'm going to use as an example, and it might be the first thing that pops in my head. So please use your discretion and do your own research. If at some point you need to leave the webinar, then feel free to do so. We will send you a link to the recording. It'll be up in about a day or so. Let's start out and look at a little comparison between our tools. We have the CoreSSG, and the name is very much like it sounds. It is the basic parts of the methodology. It was also designed to be less confusing to use for the person new to the methodology. SSGPlus is where we are intending to add most of our new features. However, if there's something that's beneficial to all audiences, then we'll certainly add them to both. And you'll see that happening with one of our new features now. Some of the I'm highlighting here some of the main differences in the tools. So between the Core and Plus, the Core is a step-by-step product, and the SSG Plus, to get a stock selection guide done, is primarily a 2-page process. So it's a little bit quicker there. Portfolios, you only have 1 report in the CoreSSG, and SSG Plus has 4 reports. There's quarterly data in the SSG Plus, or an in-depth quarterly data functionality. And then there's a pretty big difference in the screening capabilities. So not a ton of screening criteria. If you want over 100 screening criteria, we actually have a whole separate product that our sister company sells. But we're up to 12 individual screening criteria for the SSG Plus. There is a bit of a price difference here, $93 to $110 per year. That's all in. So if you're a club member, it's split up a little bit differently, but you're all paying the same kinds of numbers, $93 or $110 per year. Now that includes every part of our Better Investing membership, plus access to downloadable stock data if you have a product like Toolkit, and so forth. So that is a very general overview. One of our questions that comes up is, which one is right for me, or which one should I recommend, or I need to replace my current tool, which one should I buy? So we've kind of started itemizing some of these suggestions. You should be starting out with the CoreSSG if you've never done a stock selection guide before, or potentially if you only do one once per month. You got a lot of possibilities for forgetting stuff between those time periods. If in total you've done less than something like 20 SSGs, you might want to start out with Core. I know every educator has a different number than 20, and I think yours is probably a little bit higher. I've heard Ken use a number that's potentially a little bit less, but we're going to settle on around 20. Sometimes we see people using the CoreSSG if you want an educational refresher. And then one of the most interesting ways is if you are demonstrating this methodology to someone new. The Core is a great product where you can kind of take them through step by step. And SSG Plus is good for you if you do more, basically more volume. You're very familiar with the methodology. If you're a current or former Toolkit user, there's a piece of functionality called the preferred procedure that is available in SSG Plus only if you want to see that in-depth quarterly data, get access to more of those portfolio reports, or look at more screening criteria. So hopefully that's a pretty good guideline for you. So remember, same SSG methodology, same results. One of the things that we're constantly trying to do is put out new updates. Sometimes they're bigger than others, and so that's where we're going to go tonight. Given a general overview of the Core, looks a lot like SSG Plus, tabs on the side, graphical display on every page, table display at the bottom, education and SSG basics up on the upper right. So this structure with the education built in is why we like to start people out with Core. There's graph, and here's the legend for operating the graph. Menu at the top. Some of the underused features here are these next and back buttons. Super helpful if you're a new person or you're showing somebody how to work their way through the tools. Just do the activity on the page if that's where you're at, like doing a judgment or something, but keep clicking next. The top menu bar, or the company where the company name is a mouse over item. And while Ann and I do this all the time, we're not seeing a lot of other people do that. So while yes, it has the name and the ticker and the study name here, if you mouse over really quick, you can see what your price date is, what the price was, when that fiscal year end is. So I can look at this and see I've probably got first quarter data in. Now, if I already know this company, that's great. But there's many, many studies that we open that we don't know. And you will need a refresher. What industry are these guys in again? What sector are they in again? And a really quick, short description on what they do. And sometimes this is helpful just to make sure you have the right company if someone gives you a ticker. So again, mouse over that to pop that up. Quick navigation. If you are going from one study to the next, and or you're opening a new study, please use a quick navigation. There shouldn't be a reason that you need to go back to the studies tab if you are just going from one stock selection guide to another. So that is this green button to the right here, and if you click on it, it'll open this panel. It pops up in the middle of your screen, and you can enter a new ticker and then start a new study. Or you can select from your recently saved studies. They're ordered from the one you worked on most recently to the older ones. So that's helpful. The other thing you want to know is that you can use this search box for quick access. Anything that appears in the study name is fair game for searching, such as the ticker, like CMG for Chipotle. You can see it brings up this list of all CMG studies. Or let's say I might have labeled all of my studies with my all my club studies with the club name, and I just search for club name and then I can bring them up. So super easy way of filtering them out using that name box here. Not too much new with research. The latest thing that we've added is the Morningstar Key Ratios link right here. But I want to point out the FinViz link here under Key Statistics. We don't talk about it much, but Anna and I are finding that we're using it more and more. And the reason is, since Yahoo Finance changed the structure of their pages and the layout, finding relevant company news is pretty painful. It's mixed in with ads. It doesn't seem to be of the same quality that we saw before. So FinViz, on the page that lists the key statistics, down at the bottom has a listing of company news that it's a nicely formatted list, and we think does a better job at this point than the old standby Yahoo Finance for that. So wanted to bring that up to you guys tonight. Another thing, people, that I'm still getting the question on that people don't seem to be realize or are using enough is if you are the person that likes to add or edit data. There's a way to do that. In the data menu item under annual data, click there, and as soon as you start typing in the bottom row, it will add another year of data. You can also edit any one of these rows by simply typing in a new number. So take advantage of that. One of the things that's in the works is, it's not live yet, but one of the things that's in the works is the ability to lock data. So let's say you've added it and it's something that you figured out, like you adjusted it, or you're copying value line data in and you don't want it overwritten. So we're going to give you the ability to lock that selectively. So that's in progress right now. Quarterly data, you can do it there as well. Whoops. And on the quarterly data, you'll see one of our newer features, which is the data status indicator. We'll cover that in the next slide as well. So yeah, quarterly data, you can add or edit in the same fashion. And this is a feature that is available in both Core and Plus. So no discrimination there. This data status indicator is a little bit nice because let's say you do make an edit to your data, you would see a U in this column. And in about the beginning of February, earnings season for annual reports is going to come up for about 75% of our U.S. companies. So everybody gets real excited about that. 10K filings are audited, and earnings season starts about the first week in February. When that happens, if the company provides a complete set of financials, Morningstar will bring the data in, but label it as preliminary. They go through a whole bunch of other checks and so forth, and then they wait for the 10K to be issued before this will turn into an F or final. But if the company has a press release with full financial statements where they can populate data, you'll see it come in as preliminary. So we start getting that question primarily, we get it around other earnings seasons throughout the year, but it really comes out in February the most. So that's a little bit of a new feature. Also, preliminary data in SSGPlus is marked with a little P in the table area. So you'll see it here, you'll see it here, indicating it's preliminary. Sometimes, but not usually, we see data changed between preliminary and final. I would say 95, 98% of the time it doesn't change, but sometimes it does. You'll see a small change between preliminary and final. Maybe the company has given us a slightly different breakdown or more clarity or more precision on the number in the official 10K filing, maybe causing 7959 to turn into 7958 or something like that. So this will give you an at-a-glance look to see if that data is preliminary or final. Okay, another thing that we want to make sure everyone knows is how to share your SSG. And what I can say is you probably have more opportunities to use this than you realize. So what I want you to do here is understand that it's under File and Share Study, And if you click on that, up opens this panel. And you can select the type of items that you want to share. There's a couple different output formats, and where you want to send it to, and include a personal message. So let's go through those options. If you are sending this to another known online tools user, the easiest hot ticket way is to select the first checkbox, and they will get a copy in their email box. There's nothing to do except click the link, which accepts it into their account. It is a copy. It's not the same. It's not access to your study. It's just a copy for them. Some other options here, if you're sending to Toolkit users, are sending it in two different formats, SSG data or ITK data file. Then you can simply send them a PDF printout. This is applicable for everyone. You know, they should be able to read a PDF. So that might be an attractive option if you're sending it outside our community, somebody who doesn't have a tool but maybe wants to see the SSG analysis in some way. One of the questions that we get at this point are, do you have to choose only one of these sets? No, you can send all four. That is no problem at all. I will tell you that to create the PDF takes a few seconds. So if you select this PDF option, your email is going to take about 6 seconds in total to compile and send off. But other than that, there is no problem with sending, you know, 4 different ways of getting access to this data, which you may want to do. Let's say your club is a mixed club, and what I mean by that is that some people use online tools, some people use Toolkit, and there's a question coming in right now, can you export an SSG file to Stock Analyst? Yes, you can. Stock Analyst is an older product. It's actually not sold anymore by iClub, but I believe the SSG data file has the fields that Stock Analyst can read correctly. So I would recommend, if you are going to send somebody a file to import into Toolkit, that the ITK data file is the one you would want to use. ITK data file has the notes embedded, and the SSG data file does not have, if you've made notes in your study, it doesn't have anything embedded there. But it shouldn't, you know, it should be able to be imported into Stock Analyst. No problem there. So the next thing you would do is select your recipients. And how you do that is you're going to go to a little online address book. If you are using this for the first time, you'll have nothing listed here. So what you want to do is add the email address of the person and click Add, and then select from them to whom to send it. You'll notice that there's a green Add Club Members link here. And what that does for you, if you are a member of an investment club that's a registered BetterInvesting club, we will, let me get to that page. We will be able to pull up who we know that's in your club. So we have a club that all BI employees are in, and these are the club members. So every one of them is in here, and I can simply add those to my contacts or my online address book. The email address that comes in will be the one that's associated with their BI account. And let me tell you, I have seen that some of these sharing emails fail because the wrong email address has been entered. So you know, just pay attention to that. I believe you're going to get a failure notice if it doesn't go through. So if you do, go in and correct your online address book by clicking on the Edit button. I see a question coming through here that says, will the notes go with the online sharing button? Yeah, so let me back up. If you choose copy of the online study, yes, all the notes go with it. The notes, the judgment, everything. It's just a copy. It's not yours. You know, if someone opened it and modified it, they're not modifying yours, but everything else goes with it. Peers go with it, exactly how yours is set up. So I hope that answers that one. So you're going to pick people out of your address book. we can read who your club members are, so there's a little bit of an advantage to having your club registered as a BI club. Hopefully we'll be finding other ways to make that happen for you, make it advantageous for you as well. And then you can select only some of the people in your list, or you can select all of them. You're going to make little check boxes on who you want to send your study to. You're going to select those recipients, hit return, and then those those email addresses are going to appear here in the list. You can send a copy of this back to yourself if you'd like by clicking this box, and then you can add a personal message as well that says, hey, this is part of our industry study, or this is what I'm considering. What do you guys think? Sometimes we get questions in our club like, what did you use for that judgment point? Or how did you come up with that preferred procedure calculation? So all of that comes across with the online study button, and then they can see. It's like, oh, here are the modifications I made. So, you know, when you think about it, and you're talking about, let's say somebody is a new stock watcher in your club, and they're making judgment edits or something, then they can just make their edits and send it back to you. Or like I said, you have a new stock watcher, the old stock watcher can hand off the ongoing SSG to the new stock watcher, and it's a seamless process here. So you're going to, if you look for it, you're going to find a lot of different cases where you can share. And we're going to encourage you to do that here. Now, on the other end, the person that gets the email sees something like this. They see the attachments, if there is an attachment, like here's that SSG file, here's that ITK file, here's a PDF of the 2-page SSG report. This is fixed text, like someone has shared a study with you. If they're sharing the online version, you'll see this link. Click here to create a copy of that shared study and open it in the Better Investing Online SSG. If you've not chosen that option, this little paragraph will not appear. And then here's a personal message that was written in that comment box. Take a look at this study on Starbucks. So that's what they'll see. Now, to accept the online SSG, literally all you have to do is click. The program will go through some steps, and then it will be part of your account. It will already be saved into your account. You don't have to hit the save button even. So I hope that process is pretty clear. If you have questions about what I'm going through, you will, like I said, there will be a recording here, but there's also handouts available through the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll also be posting the handouts with the webinar when we post it on our website, but all of these slides are in the handout that is in the GoToWebinar control panel. Okay, so then the person that receives it, if they're interested in the attachments, they would just download them and save them on their computer and import them or use them or print them, whatever is appropriate for that kind of file type. Now, one of the things we want to make sure that everyone knows is that if you have SSG Plus, you can move back and forth. You can go back to Core and over back to Plus. If you have SSG Plus and you are in Core, like this screenshot shows, you will see a button here, and that's how you switch back and forth. You just click the button, you'll see that exact same study in the SSG Plus view, and you're on your way. You're here, you would switch, you'd be in SSG Plus with that exact same study. And then you could see the button change. It says click, go back to Core right here. So we talked about the overview of the CoreSSG screen. This is the overview of the SSG Plus first tab. Very similar, same width, same colors, graphical area here, table area over here, legend for manipulating the graph. A little bit more as far as more information put on this screen. So this is what I was saying. It's just got more features, more functionality. For a person who's comfortable with the product it's not a problem. But for a new person coming in, oftentimes you're going to find they don't know what to do if they land on this screen. That's why we're going to say start out with Core for those users. Same kind of items going on the screen as I just pointed out. The Manage tabs, wherever you are in these online tools, on the left are your guide to the various major functionality. Navigation's always at the top, and the menu items are off on the upper right. That switch to Core. Quick Nav is the same in both Core and Plus, as is that feature that I told you about, mousing over to find out more about the company, the price date really quick, and so forth. You could find out a lot of that by clicking on the data button, but this is so much quicker just to do the mouse over. Now, another thing I want to tell you about are the movable graph lines. If you are a Toolkit user, you may be used to this, and so I'm going to show you how you can utilize those. So all of the graph lines on the screen are movable, meaning they can move up and down. They cannot move side to side because we want to keep them on the right years, but you can move them up and down. Out of the gate, the lines are scaled a certain way, and they revenues at the top, pre-tax profits in the middle, earnings is at the bottom, and the price bars are shown such that where the price intersects earnings, that it's always at a 10 PE. So this was an old guideline that George Nicholson always followed, so that you could tell at a glance what the PE was for the stock. But we allow people to move things around. And one of the reasons that we do that is so that you can kind of lay maybe earnings on top of sales, so that you can see if they're growing at the same rates visually and so forth. You could look at pre-tax profit on top of earnings to see if it's growing at the same rate, or if there's a difference between pre-tax profit and the earnings at the bottom line. To do that, you're going to drag them up and down. That's all. You're just going to put your mouse over them and drag them up and down. If you want to reset the chart back to where it was with the default scaling, that's what this reset chart button does. That's all. So that part is pretty simple. Another thing I want to point out here is this forecast earnings panel. It's got a lot of information on it, and it comes up when you are going to forecast your earnings. This forecasting sales panel is much, much simpler. Earnings has a lot going on, and I'm going to actually back up a few slides. Sorry, I'm going to go here. These two green boxes are where we enter our sales and earnings judgment. So if I click on the historical earnings button here, then I'm going to that forecast earnings panel. This is what pops up. So up at the top, we see a place to just simply enter an earnings per share growth rate forecast. If the company had an analyst estimate, it would appear here, and it's another nice reference point. And then we have the preferred procedure calculation panel right here. So that would provide me with an answer. So in this particular example, whatever this company is, if I had used a 10% revenue growth rate in this example, the calculator would suggest that 14% is another nice reference point. Here's all the backup data that you might use with that preferred procedure calculation. But then we also have a couple of newer items that people need to know about. These are the growth trend panels. So when you're considering, along with all of your reference points, you should be considering whether the recent growth is increasing or decreasing. And this is the way to do it. So if you click on one of those panels, you'll either, if you click on sales growth, you'll see a panel that looks like this pop up. Or if you click on the earnings growth trend, you'll see very similar, but just with the earnings data. And what that tells us is that this is a list of growth rates from all 9 years down to just 1 year. And so what this is showing me is that as we get closer to now, the growth rate is slowing. So back in the day, the growth rate all in was more like a 12%, 12.5%. Now we're seeing 10%-ish numbers for sales. That is what this trend shows. Now, so this is not negative sales growth. This is the fact that the growth rates are slowing. Earnings per share growth trend is exactly the same concept. If you count all 9 years, there was 14%, 14.3% growth. If you count only the last 5 increments, from 2009 to 2014, the growth rate actually increased to 29.4%. But then more recently, if you only count from 2013 to 14, it slowed down. This year ago number is really the trailing 12, this year over last year number. Same number as you would see at the front of the SSG, which is the quarter over quarter growth trend. So in this case, for earnings, we can see it was slower, the growth sped up, and the growth is abating now. But the recent quarter is back at 9.8%. So that can help as another reference point with your judgments. So to illustrate that, if my words were a bit confusing, let's do this visually. Here's that sales growth trend, well, another example of a sales growth trend chart. And we can see from 2007 to 2015, the growth rate was 8.6. So between here and here, the growth rate was 8.6. In this example, we're looking at from 2010 to 2015, and that was 9.4. So that would be the section of line from here up to here, so 9.4. A shorter span of time from 2012 to 2015 would be right here, 7.8%. So that would be this little section of line that goes from here to here, and growth is slowing. It's 7.8. But then we see the last 1 year from 2014 to 2015, it was 10%. So sometimes that's hard to pick out on the graph here. If you look hard, you're like, okay, I can kind of see that. So this table is a nice visual to show you how the recent growth trends have been tracking. So before we move on from this concept, are there any questions on the growth trend charts? No, okay.
Not right now, Susie. They're thinking about that just as you asked for questions, I'm sure.
I know. Okay.
But we're all caught up right now.
Alrighty, perfect. One of the newer things that we added on the SSG Plus, there is an SSG results summary box. So this is a quick at-a-glance wrap-up of your completed stock selection guide. And it is on the valuation page near the bottom. And what we've indicated is what zone you're in, buy, hold, or sell, theoretically, what that upside-downside ratio is, the total return, or the return using an average PE calculation, so this is a more conservative projected return, sometimes known as par. We have had this price here, buy price to satisfy an upside downside of 3 to 1 and a 15% total return. That buy price is 75.5. But we're also asking, we've had some people asking questions about, why does it say 75.5 here, but then it says, you can buy below a totally different number? Well, that is a true statement. You can buy below based on your zoning. That's how the zones are set up. And in this case, your stock would drop into the buy zone below 89.6, which means it's something you would be getting something less than a 15% return. That is just fine. We don't demand that every stock calculate out to a 15% return. And maybe Ann, has some super more insightful comments here, but in general, our goal is that your portfolio, you're shooting for across the whole portfolio a 15% return, but every single stock does not have to be a 15% return before you buy it, before it's in the buy zone and you buy it. And do you have anything else to add there?
I do not. I thought you did a very nice job. Perfect.
Okay. So we were getting some confused users, and so we added both prices there so you can kind of see the difference. Now remember, the buy zone is a measure of risk. So you can actually see, hey, technically it's a buy at 89.6. It's a better buy at 75.5, and kind of gauge your level of risk, and evaluate what kind of investor you are based on, those two numbers as a reference point. So that's been added to the SSG Plus. Moving on, we want to make sure everyone knows that you can update all data in your portfolio. Actually, let me go back because there's a question here and a comment about pricing and going out to 2 decimal places. We deliberately don't. When reporting historical numbers, sometimes we use 2 decimal places, but going out to 2 decimal places on a potential number here implies a lot more precision to this methodology than we can really deliver. So we're really trying to honor the quality growth company at a reasonable price. It doesn't much matter if it's 75.50 or 75.59. And we wanted people to feel comfortable with not having to be that precise. So there was a reason we didn't do that. Okay, moving on. Updating all data in a portfolio. If you have set up stocks in a portfolio, then there is an icon here to refresh the data in the portfolio that you have selected. So a really simple way of getting it all done at once. We do it before, multiple times a month for our club portfolio, and it's super helpful. When you do that, you will have a choice of updating the data and the prices or updating prices only. If you're at a point in the middle of the month or at a place where none of your stocks have hit quarterly updates, you can just update the prices only. Our club, for example, somehow has a portfolio that every single company reports on the same schedule. So it makes for very interesting meetings 4 times a year, but there's definitely a couple months there that there's no data updates to process. So you have that option. Most people are going to update data and prices though, so we put that at the top. One of our newest features, and for those of you who are considering bulk moving over from Toolkit 6, is the ability to import multiple files at a time through the library import from Toolkit 6. Now we've had this button around for a while, and it used to say import Toolkit file. Now we can do files. It's available in both Core and Plus through the Studies, My Studies tab. And the way it works is this. You click on that button, and it brings up a little panel, and it says Import Toolkit 6 Files. Now, we did put a beta label on it because we expect that we're going to see examples of older studies and so forth that we have not had a chance to understand what's going on there. So Toolkit lets you change a lot of data and so forth. So we're just going to ask your patience to make sure that before we take the beta label off, that we have enough external users importing their studies. But now instead of just this, so the change here, we used to allow just one study at a time, the .itk file. We do not allow an import of .ssg files. The reason is there's not enough data in an SSG file to fill out all the parts of the online SSG. It uses more data than a stock analyst or toolkit. You would not get a complete representation in the tool. So ITK does provide that. So you can do these. That's a single file. Now we've added an ITB file or an MDB file, and what those are, they're exclusive to Toolkit in terms of this terminology. ITB is a Toolkit backup. MDB is actually the Toolkit library or Toolkit main database. So you can choose any one of these formats. You would choose your file from your computer. You would select import. If you have just a single file, it will go ahead and import, give you a success message, and you're on your way. If you have a backup or a library database, you will see a list of everything that's in there. There's no restrictions on how many, how big your, I'm going to have to say this carefully, there's no restrictions on how many it can list here. So if you have a library with 5,000 stocks in it, you'll see 5,000 entries. There is a limit on how many you can import. It's 1,000. Hopefully that will suffice for 99.9% of our users who are interested in moving to the online tools. And when you do this, you don't have to import all of them. You can select. You can certainly select all of them by clicking on this Select All button. We're going to suggest that maybe you want to be a little selective and leave the old ones behind. So in this case, in my little example I set up, I exported these 6 things out of Toolkit. I didn't actually complete them, so they have a judgment date of, 1900, January 1st of 1900. I only selected 3 of them. I can totally do that. I could have selected all 6 or one of them, or click the X to cancel. Anyway, I select 3 of them just by clicking on the boxes on the
Susie?
Yes, Anne.
We lost your sound maybe 30 seconds ago.
All right. So did you hear about selecting companies to import?
We heard that, and then as you were going through that, we lost your sound. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So what I was saying is you can select all of them. You can pick them individually. You can have 1,000 thousands listed here, but you can only select 1,000 to import. You can sort each one of these columns to help you pick which ones you want to import. And once you have that selection all made, then you can also add a comment here. So I find this pretty helpful, where I made this comment here, imported from my Toolkit backup, December 15th, 2016. This comment will be applied to and copied over to the comment field in the online tools for every single one of these, so you can see which import they came out of. And then you would click on Import Selected Studies, and it would chunk through. The time to import is totally contingent upon how many you have. So 2 studies are going to import quicker than 500 studies, for example. Question here coming in, does Toolkit need to be opened to import? Not at all. At some point you will need to make the files that you are importing. So if I back up a little bit, we can look at those again. It'll import one of 3 kinds of files, an individual file, a backup file, or a library file. So that has to be on your computer system someplace. You will have had Toolkit open at some time to create those. Then you can close Toolkit and start your import process. If somebody sends you an ITK file and you don't even have Toolkit and you can import it here, that works too. You do not have to have Toolkit open to successfully run the import process. So I hope that helps there. So we add a comment, we click on the Import Selected Studies link, and they come into our account, and I've shown you in my example account that here they are in the comments. Those are the 3 that I picked. They will have the same judgments as they had in the Toolkit program. They will have the same potential return and so forth. So all of that comes together. So remember when I said at the beginning of the presentation that the tool doesn't matter? We've taken pains to try and alleviate differences between Toolkit and CoreSSG and SSGPlus. If you set a projection line start point in Toolkit, for example, as annual on one study and quarterly on other studies, that should be respected when you import it, for example. So we tried to move all of that stuff, make sure it was in. There were a few things we had to add to the ITK export process in Toolkit so it would come in successfully into the online tools. So not seeing any more questions about importing files from Toolkit, I'm going to move on. Before I move on, I'm going to actually move back a slide and point out that when this panel pops up when you're importing these Toolkit files, there's a little question mark here. And that is a link to a more descriptive instructional document that is also a handout tonight. So it's about 8 steps, 7 or 8 steps, and it goes through what I just went through in an instructional document. Now, let's say you have some older studies, some unusual studies from Toolkit and so forth, and you get a message that says cannot be successfully imported. What I want you to do is send whatever you were trying to import to service@betterinvesting.org. That's actually part of the error message that you would see on screen. It's part of the instructional document. We'll work it out. In every single one of these cases, we've been able to work it out. So if you do run into a problem, please just send it to us and we'll get you squared away as soon as possible. Okay, Anne, any more questions on this before I move on?
I am not seeing any. I think they're all good.
Perfect. So moving on from here, really small change and that we made. Your setting is remembered if you have a number of portfolios. If you have this setting, the remembering of how many entries to show at a time was also made a while back to your list of studies, but we also added it to portfolios. I had 11 portfolios. The default used to be 10. That 11th one kept dropping off the radar, so I kept setting it to 25. And now that 25 is remembered, and I'm all happy. So very small, trivial thing, but I just wanted to make sure that people knew that we're working on the little stuff like this. Now let's talk about one of the bigger changes, and that's in screening and stock ideas. The CoreSSG view has not changed. So you have predefined screens here. You have 2 basic screens for quality and value. We have 5 individual criteria here that you can search on, and then your search results and so forth are at the bottom. We did add a while back, less than a year ago, this U.S. exchanges only. We do cover Canadian exchanges and U.S. exchanges, but the bulk of our customers are in the U.S. and are primarily concerned with U.S. exchanges. There is an option here to change to just Canadian or all. So, but it defaults to U.S. And then the results are shown at the bottom. There has been no changes in that section except in the SSGPlus that I'll show you. SSGPlus got some changes. Still have the predefined screens. Our latest change here was to add their roster of quality, but that was a while back. We used to have 9 criteria. Now we have 12. We have added the Morningstar growth grade, profitability grade, and financial health grade or ranking. These are the same grades that if you have a premium Morningstar subscription and you're doing their screening tool that you would see or be able to pick from. They have allowed us to show them in our tool. So we're pretty happy about that we can bring you some additional screening criteria. With the advent of more screening criteria, we also added a reset criteria button. As you're playing around with these things, it became tedious to turn them, you might have had this set at 8, then you got to unbuckle everything. So anyway, the reset criteria sets everything back to default as you would see it here. Ticker heat map, no changes there. I just want to point that out. This is like a measure of what's being studied in the community, and it is covered in our Screening and Stock Ideas webinar. The results show at the bottom. There are a few changes here. You are still able to open preview a new study, but what we'll show you is the grades are listed in the results. Before we get to that, let's get you a little bit of background on what these grades are. So this is a data-based scoring system, and no analyst makes a subjective call. So it's all based on their filing data, the equity data that's in the system. So they have an algorithm. They have an algorithm for growth, an algorithm for profitability, and one for financial health. And they run their algorithm, and then they split it out. So it's a reference. A's are the top 10%, B's are the next 20%, C's are the middle 40%, D's are 20% near the bottom, and F's are the bottom 10%. And so things might change depending on economic conditions and so forth. So this is directly out of their explanation to me. And we want you to make sure that you understand that the statement that's written here. It says, due to accounting conventions, however, these grades may or may not reflect the underlying economic reality, and the investors should view the grades as a starting point for analysis. So, great for screening. Don't buy off of this system. I'm looking at a great idea here. Is there a way to get these values in the individual study without going to the Morningstar site or back to the screener? Not yet, but that's a great suggestion. We could add them to the data panel or the quick reference panel pretty easily, so thank you for that.
Susie, another question is coming up. Now, do all of the stocks that we cover have these Morningstar grades, or is it a subset of the stocks that are covered, or what?
Not all stocks have a grade. Some stocks, if they don't have enough data, so in general, I cannot expose their exact algorithms.
Sure.
For one, I don't know the exact algorithm. I have the gist of it, but that's also part of what's a little bit protected. But in most cases, the company has to have at least 4 years of data. So for growth, for example, I also know that it's based upon revenue growth. So the company has to have 4 years of revenue listed, and sequential revenue actually. So the last 4 years have to be populated. So if they don't meet that minimum data, enough data available, then they'll get a little dash, dash, dash in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, Morningstar grades. So here's an example where I have chosen like the growth grade of, and this is how they're going to be represented. Actually, let's go back here. This is your choices. We chose to narrow it down and say, give me anything that's an A or better. Sometimes they put A pluses, so this kind of covers it all. Give me anything that's better than a B or better or a C or better. We figured you don't have much interest in D's and F's. If you do, just put this at any. So all three are set up the same way. So in my example, I said, give me the growth grades of B or better. I want A or better profitability grades, A or better financial health grades. And then you'll see we've added those columns to the results list for the SSGPlus users. So these are always going to be there. Now because I selected those, these are all populated. So if there's dashes, they're going to get missed. and you wouldn't see them in your list. If you don't use any of these and do some other kind of screen, you will see that you will see some dashes in this section. So I hope that's self-explanatory there.
Yeah, so just to clarify on that, we'll always see these Morningstar grades in our results listing, whether or not we've used that criteria in our
Right.
search selections.
How about we'll go live?
Cool.
Alrighty. So let's make sure everybody can see this. So I've gone live. I've got the screening up in Chrome. So let's say I do, give me sales and earnings at 8%, pre-tax profit up or even, return on equity trend up or even, and I just search on that. So I've not touched these new growth grade things. But if I go to the results list and take a look, there they are. And we see some of these have a financial health of D. This one's blank on the growth grade. So which one was this? ADPT. So let's take a preview of that one. Yeah, we don't have that many years of revenue. That's why we're not seeing a growth grade there. So that gives you a sense of the kind of data that you're going to see. Is that helpful?
I think it is. It's okay. Now we can see that, and then to remind people, they can always sort on those columns.
Right.
And
you can sort. There's the ones with nothing and the ones with Fs.
Right.
Here's a great way you can use the filters.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I just want any A's there, and then I can sort on this field. So use your filters in your screening results. And again, if this is new to you and how to use the screening and screening results, all of this is covered in the Screening and Stock Ideas webinar that we have on YouTube or we have posted on the website. Okay? All right, moving on. Don't forget about previewing a stock. I just showed you that live. This is this little icon here. If you preview it, you can see a little mini SSG. And what we like to do is develop our screen and then just keep going through, one after another, and then making a note about which ones we want to go back and study further. So that's what these forward and back buttons do in the preview. It just chunks the way through the list. And so don't forget about that. Other helpful stuff that would answer a lot of people's questions are found in this bottom tab called the Help and Information screen. And what we have here are links to the tools tutorials. So I mentioned that Screening and Stock Ideas webinar. It is right here, a link to that. It's also all by itself on our YouTube channel or the public and member pages in case you don't have access to the tool. So don't worry about that. Quick start guides. These are little short steps about getting through like a CoreSSG or SSGPlus in the most efficient manner. Breaks it down into, I think the CoreSSG's got about 10 steps, SSGPlus has a few less, and so forth. Reference materials. If you have a question with things like, what are your guidelines? We say it's guidelines for beginners because lots of times people who have a lot of experience kind of expand beyond that, but still a great set of guidelines here. A comparison chart between the two products. A calculation reference. When you're looking at something in the tool and you're like, how do they calculate it? We're not trying to hide anything. So the document is a work in progress, but I think we've got 95% of all of our calculations exposed there for you to peruse. We have an FAQ website and a feedback forum if you want to submit a suggestion for future improvement. And then a member benefit of accessing our classes. So if you go to the Education tab of the website, under My Classes, you can see a whole bunch of class is a better methodology. So sometimes when we run like the core or plus basic usage, we start getting questions about, well, how do you make judgments, or what's the thought process behind this? And it's not really something we have enough time to cover in the webinar, but the pure education classes cover it in an excellent manner. So with that, let me just remind you again, if you have a suggestion that you'd like to see added to the tool or for future improvement, you can submit it at feedback.betterinvesting.org or vote. You don't have to be a Better Investing member to do this. We don't automatically pick the top ones and work on them. There's a process between what seems popular, what makes sense from an educational perspective, does it make sense with where we want the direction of the tool to go, and how many resources do we have to work on it. Some things are often a little more difficult than you might think to implement, so that's part of it. But we do look at that when we're considering what's next. FAQ site has a section just about the online stock tools, and that is found at faq.betterinvesting.org, and all kinds of different questions. There's probably 60 different FAQ topics just about the online tools. So with that, we've pretty much reached the end. Are there any final questions here?
Well, there's not really any questions unless maybe you want to comment. There's a couple of ideas, and I will point out to the people that put those in to use that feedback.betterinvesting.org. Maybe, I don't know if you want to comment if either of these are in the mix. I don't think the second one is, and I think it's an interesting idea about putting a price line with the yearly closing prices on the price bar. That could be interesting.
Yeah, so what that means is we have a set of price bars. We could put a, yearly closing price kind of implies that it would be added as of the last trading day of the year. I'm not sure that, I'd have to evaluate how useful that one is.
Right.
But what I have heard before that people would like to do are trend lines for the high price and low price, much like we do trend lines for growth for sales and earnings. So you can get a sense for those two, high price and low price. Are they moving together? Is there more volatility? Are they actually tracking earnings and so forth? So yeah, intriguing. So please add that to the feedback forum. There's another question here about any plans to add PEs next to the current high and low prices in the valuation table. Maybe we actually were talking about a better method of calculating the PEs on a monthly basis, which would include the most current numbers, so you could see how PEs are tracking more real time with when the earnings happened. Mm-hmm. And you could show the next year, the current year in that view. So
yeah,
maybe not exactly how it's done in Toolkit, but similar concept. We are definitely noodling around.
Right. I'm not. Okay. I was going to say something, but I'm not going to. Okay.
Okay.
It's a whole nother class or something.
Right.
And Judy's just wondering why discriminate against the CoreSSG doesn't have some of the features she's looking for, specifically the quarterly growth data.
You mean the in-depth quarterly data?
I believe that's what she's talking about, the in-depth quarterly data.
All right, so what Judy is talking about here, let me pick a company and open it. Boy, I don't know anything. Packaging Corp, I think they're...
they're decent.
I think I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're okay. Right. They're okay.
So there's a quarterly data tab here in SSGPlus, and it will show you some of the trailing 4 quarters or each individual quarter. And, if you have made a projection, it will pop your projection line on the screen. So let me just quickly make a very dummy projection here of like 2%, because it looks like this company doesn't have much growth recently. So then I can go back and say it would show me my my line there, and
Can I try to answer her question while you're doing this? I'm just
yeah,
going to
sure.
say that, Judy, generally, this graph can be somewhat confusing even for the
Right.
initiated user, somebody who's used to the methodology. And the core SSG being designed truly for the beginner, this would, I think, quickly overwhelm. If you're looking for this graph and you are seeking this graph, I would identify you as ready to move on to the SSG Plus, and I think you should come on into the fold and get everything that SSG Plus has to offer. But
Right.
that's the main reason. We just don't want to overwhelm and confuse our newer investors, our people new to the methodology. We want to keep it clear and focused until
Right.
they become comfortable with that and ready to move on to
Yeah,
the next step.
thank you for putting that together. I fully agree with that. I would also say that we get a lot of misinterpretation of this data. So it looks like, oh, well, it's barely growing, and then it's got super growth, and then it's not growing. That's not true at all. This is a change in growth rates. So it takes a little bit of you learn about it and then you come back again and you really kind of have to absorb the concepts that are on here. But yeah, it's CoreSSG is designed not to confuse. And so we would, there is quarterly data in the CoreSSG. It's just not, these 10 years of quarterly data is not presented. You get the most recent quarter,
Right.
year over year. Okay, any other questions?
Nothing else, Susie? We're all caught up in the question box now.
All right, perfect. Well, if you guys have any additional questions or you want to speak to us further, please give us a shout by telephone or by email at service@betterinvesting.org, and don't forget to submit your requests for new features or improvements. And with that, I will again thank all of the attendees who took time out of their busy night to sit with us here, as well as our backroom staff. So good night, all.